Hello, everyone, and welcome to a live stream. One that I haven't, one that I'm really excited to do. Today is the Starship orbital flight test, and that is what you see on your screen there. That is Starship stacked on the booster, and it's probably one of the most historic space flights as of today, other than obviously like the Apollo and Artemis missions that are going back to the moon. But this is SpaceX's most influential test flight today, at least in my opinion, because this is the vehicle that was chosen by NASA to go back to the moon in 2025. Sorry for the lighting. I didn't really have time or really want to put in the effort to fix everything. And when the stream starts and everything, I'm going to take my face off so I can just comment over things and you guys not be distracted by anything. I am tuning in directly to the SpaceX live stream. That's what you have on your screen right now. If you want to go watch them directly, you can obviously go to the link that's in the description of this live stream, and that'll take you exactly to where I'm watching it from. But I'm super excited for this. It's going to be probably one of the coolest launches you'll ever get to see, at least through a live stream right now and until they start launching these more regularly. Some cool things about this, if I'm correct in all this, this is the largest launch vehicle to date, which will be cool because it's going to beat out the Artemis launch vehicle, SLS, which actually just launched not too long ago, a few months ago, and that went back to the moon. But this will be the largest launch vehicle to date. And so what you see at the top of your screen or in the top of the screen, the whole black section of this rocket is the Starship launch vehicle. Now they've had about, I think it's 7 launch attempts with these vehicles with the Starship just itself. From I think SN8 was the very first one all the way up and through SN24, which is I'm pretty sure the one that is currently sitting on the pad. I'm going to check myself on that just because I haven't because I don't want to tell you guys the wrong thing. Because we want to, yes, this is Starship number 24 on the Super Heavy booster, also booster number 7 in correlation to how they number their things. The last Starship launch was actually, I think, 2 years ago. Last Starship launch was on May of 2021. So it's been about almost 2 years since that was SN15, and that was actually the first Starship to land, and it landed safely without blowing up or damaging the Starship itself. And so this has been a long time coming. I've watched every single Starship launch since then, or not since then, but from the beginning of when they were testing them, from Starhopper all the way through the test flights of Starship, and it's been something I've followed quite closely throughout this whole time, and I'm really excited to see it all come together and get put into fruition of today, and then see what they can really get out of this, whether it's just testing, whether it gets off the launch pad today or not. And I think that's probably the biggest thing that we're worrying about is that this is a 2.5 hour launch window. So they're set to try to launch at around 8:15 a.m. this morning. This is Eastern time. They're obviously in Boca Chica, Texas, which is Central Standard Time, so it's about 7:15 there. So if you're watching this from any of the time zones, just know I'm coming from the Eastern time zone. So I'm going to be obviously about an hour or 2 hours before any of you guys if you're on the West Coast or if you're in the central of the United States. But like I was saying, this is one of the most exciting launch attempts that I'm ever going to be able to see. And I actually just got to see my very first launch of a Falcon 9 about 3 weeks ago on my spring break. That was the resupply mission, CRS-27, I'm pretty sure it was. And so that was probably one of the coolest things is to actually see a rocket launch in person, because I've watched about every rocket launch that's gone off, not only SpaceX, but Astrospace, and then also the Relativity launch that just happened. And I've watched every single rocket launch from across the world, obviously through live streams since probably November of 2019. So I've been at this for a long time, and I'm really excited to actually get to cover this one today because I don't have classes this morning. And I'm going to be able to talk through it, and it's going to be probably one of the coolest things. I'm going to pull up some information so that I'm not just sitting here. and talking about it, and so we can talk a little bit on what's actually going to happen today. And then I'm also going to be following through them on their Twitter page, which is where they'll be posting updates if something gets scrubbed or if a hold happens, which is probably what we're looking at today. Obviously, SpaceX is really good at what they do, but it's also a test vehicle, and we don't really know how it's going to react once it gets off the pad, or even if it's going to get off the pad today. And so that's something that we are going to have to figure out as this goes along. Is Starship actually going to launch today, fully, or are we going to have to wait for another day because it gets scrubbed because they're having to go through anything? But regardless, having the approvals and the registration to be able to do something like this is something that we've been waiting on for a long time. I know the FAA was kind of like the thorn in our side for a little bit to try to get clearances to launch Starship, but seeing it come together, seeing Mechzilla get built and the control tower, and then obviously the launch mounts and everything, and then seeing them stack Starship fully about, I think it was about a year ago, was probably a really cool thing that I got to see as well, and that everyone really got to see. And so now we're finally getting into a new age of spaceflight, and that is something that is different. Like, you have the Apollo era and you have the space shuttle era, and I think we're walking into the Starship era, where we're going to be flying these huge launch vehicles, getting ourselves to Mars, getting ourselves back to the moon, but not just getting ourselves back to the moon, but doing it frequently. And so we're going to open up the possibilities to expand past the Earth, which is really what all SpaceX is trying to do here, is expand past the Earth. And I'm excited to see where they go for it. I'm gonna keep looking at the SpaceX live stream to see if there's anything here, and then once they start this live stream, I'll turn on their audio, and if they're talking a lot, I will try to let them talk because they definitely know a lot more about this than I do. But I'm excited to be able to cover this, and excited to see where this goes today. So let me pull up some information, and I'll be right back. So, something I completely forgot to do was make this stream public. Um, so, if anyone's just joining us right now, which I don't think there is, um, they are currently 6 minutes ago. SpaceX just tweeted out that they are fueling Starship's upper stage is now underway, and then 23 minutes ago, fueling of the Super Heavy booster went underway. And so we're getting close. They're fueling this thing up. They're getting ready for it on the stream in about 2 minutes and 42 seconds, 2.5 minutes until their stream starts, and then they're now targeting 8:20 a.m. Central Time for launch, which 8:20 Central Time for them would be 9:20 Central Time for us for the launch, which means their launch window. Let me make sure when the launch window opens. I'm pretty sure their launch window opens at 7:15 Central Time, 7 a.m. Central Time. Yep. So they are about an hour later than what they expected to be, I assume. But of course, that happens to space flight. We're going to get pushed back on things, and they're loading right now. And I could be wrong in that just because based off time zones. But their stream is about to start in about 2 minutes here. And we're about to have the largest launch vehicle go off today if it gets off the pad and if it doesn't get a scrub, which is completely something that if you watch launches at all, you know that that's a huge thing that can happen, most definitely. But I was taking a look at some websites and looking about kind of what to expect today. What you see on your screen right now is SN24 or Starship number 24 sitting on top of their super heavy booster, and that is booster number 7. So it's their 7th booster in production. They've done testing with others. They tear them down, then they rebuild them back. Some history of this is that Starship has actually flown a number of times in prototype eras, not this 24, but ones before. I'm pretty sure the first one was Starship number 8, which did its 10-mile hop and then came back down and landed, but unfortunately it landed a little bit too hard and blew up, which was something that we didn't expect to happen, but it's a testing, and it did everything else phenomenally, and really just getting off the pad was something that was amazing to see. And then we went to SN10, which went up, and then it landed, but it kind of crushed itself, so it landed a little bit too hard. And then I'm pretty sure the third and final one was SN16 or SN15, which actually went up. It did its flip, and then it actually landed, and that was 2 years ago on May 5th in 2021. And so we're roughly about 2 years after the first or the last Starship launch. And so this is going to be one of the most exciting things, and this is the largest launch vehicle to date, which is another thing that's going to be really cool is to see, because we just saw the new record holder, which was the Artemis SLS launch vehicle launched 2 months ago, which went back to the moon with the Orion capsule, and then we are seeing a new era of launch vehicle. And as I said earlier, when I started, that we had the Apollo missions, and then we had the shuttle missions, and then we now have the Starship missions, the Starship era, or should I say the Apollo era, the shuttle era, and then now it's the Starship era. And it's going to be something really excited for all of the new generation of space fanatics like myself to grow up and to see a whole new era of space flight. And I'm pretty sure we're going to be able to get faster at launching these things, just like they've done with the Falcon 9. I was able to see a Falcon 9 launch just 3 weeks ago with the crew supply mission, CRS-27, I'm pretty sure that was. And that was really cool. And that was just a single Falcon 9 launching. And then we also have a few heavy vehicles launching. We have a ULA. I'm pretty sure it's their Delta 4 Heavy launch coming up soon, as well as a Falcon Heavy launch coming up soon as well. But today we're sitting here waiting for SpaceX to start their stream. And if you're watching this and you want to watch directly from SpaceX, that link is down in this description of this live stream. I'm just wanting to cover this thing to be a part of it because this is something that I love. Space is the new frontier and is the next step towards getting humanity off Earth. And I'm just wanting to be here to cover it and be in the moment. So thank you for being here. But if you do want to watch their live stream directly, it is down below. I did put a link. But I'm going to try to pull up a schematic here for kind of what they're supposed to be, what they're going to be looking at today for the actual Starship vehicle, for the launch trajectory, and then what they're going to do. Ultimately, in time, so I'm getting this off of spaceflightnow.com. In time, they're going to want to launch the booster and the Starship together, obviously, and they're going to want to come back down and just like their Falcon 9 is land that booster. However, instead of landing the booster on the ground, which has done a ton of damage to the bottom sides of the rockets and it takes more time to refurbish, they're actually going to use what is called the Maxilla, which is, if you see on this right here, is this whole integration up here at the top. And those two arms that are going around Starship right now will actually catch the fins or be projected to catch the fins of the booster as it comes back down, so it doesn't actually have to hit the ground or land directly on the ground and burn up those Raptor engines underneath. So one, refurbishing is going to be a lot quicker, and two, they're going to be able to catch this on the back side of this launch mount right here, or the integration tower is what I guess it should theoretically be called. And it's going to be able to swing over and put the booster back down onto the ground. And that's what is going to be projected once they get these into orbit. This will not be an orbital launch today. They're not going all the way up into orbit. However, they're going, I think it was 250 miles up. I'm not totally sure how high they go, but they won't be getting into orbit, but they'll be getting high enough to where it'll orbit, kind of, not orbit, but it'll go around the Earth close to one time. It said about through here. And so what we're going to be able to see is it's about a 90-minute, a whole trajectory is going to be about 90 minutes, which is a very long time for one of these, because the Falcon 9 takes about 10 minutes to get up into orbit and come back down and land. And so this is going to be quite a bit longer. And so what we'll see is we'll see launch, and then we'll see it pitch down range, and we'll see it get to its apogee right here where separation will occur. And then the booster will perform its flip, which will come back down, and they're actually going to land it in the ocean. They're going to do what's called a soft landing. So instead of catching it or landing on land, they're going to try to perform their thruster maneuvers, and that's going to come back down and actually land in the ocean. And so they're not going to be able to recover it, like refurbish this and recover them, but they'll recover them out of the ocean. And then Starship will continue going a little bit higher, hitting the Starship apogee. And then what it's going to do is it's going to perform its landing maneuver, which if you've watched it ever at a time, it's going to flip. And then it's actually going to come flat. And so if you watch any of the SN8, SN10, or SN15, the way those landed is when they go up, they'll flip around and they fall back to Earth horizontal. So like you see the Falcon 9 boosters come in at an angle, and then they do their landing burns, one up in the upper atmosphere, and then another one as it comes down actually lands on their drone ships or on land, and the legs flip out. Well, instead, what Starship's going to do is it's going to come down vertically, and it's going to use the four fins. It doesn't have grid fins like the Falcon 9 does, but it has, like, I guess I wouldn't call them airplane fins. They kind of look like wings. They got four wings on the sides, and that's going to control its descent to one, slow it down, and then what they do is they ignite, I'm pretty sure it's 3 of the Raptor engines underneath of it, just like they don't ignite all of the Merlin 1D engines on the Falcon 9. They're only going to light a few of the Raptor engines on the bottom of it, and it's going to flip vertical, and it's going to be able to land like this with some landing legs that I'm pretty sure stick out from the bottom. And so that's a whole different way of landing something. SpaceX is like one of the best, or is the best, at landing their rockets and reusability. They're launching like one Falcon 9 about a week right now, using like with their Starlink missions, and then they're also doing a lot of other commercial satellite missions as well, which is probably some of the coolest things. So this is kind of what we expect to see today, if it does go off. Now, we have to remember that this is a test, it is an orbital test, and this is a test vehicle. And so we may not get a launch today. We have about a 2.5-hour launch window, starting at 7:15 Central Time and ending at it'd be 9:45 Central Time for them. I'm in Eastern Standard Time, so for me right now it's 8:21, and then the launch window closes around 9:30, not 9:30, 10:30 for me. So we have about a 150-minute launch window here, and of course those launch windows are based upon weather. There were some concerns last night about some high winds, upper atmosphere winds, which of course can throw off something. And with this being a test launch, just like we saw with the Relativity launch a few weeks ago, that if they have too many different factors that could throw off their data, they probably will not launch today. However, keeping our fingers crossed, hoping that this does go off today, because it is going to be it is the largest rocket launch vehicle to date, and it's going to be something that is historic. And so I'm super glad to be covering this. And right now we're just waiting for SpaceX to start their stream. I am following them on Twitter, and if you guys don't follow SpaceX on Twitter, you probably should. They put up all their what's it called, updates. And Elon just put out something. He said cryogenic propellant load of Starship is underway, liftoff in T-minus 1 hour. So we are an hour away from probably what is the biggest launch in current history, other than the Artemis launch that happened a few weeks ago. Probably I'll call it, instead of saying this is the most monumental or the best launch, I'm going to call this the best prototype launch, because Artemis was full and they took the Orion capsule up, but this is a prototype, and it's something that is going to be really exciting to see go off. And it is the tallest and the most powerful launch vehicle to date, which is something that you don't see very often. And so I'm going to look up a little bit more information, be quiet here for a little bit, because I talk a little bit too much, and I need to find out some more information before I keep babbling. So stick around. As soon as this stream does officially start, we'll be back and we'll watch it. And they actually just changed the time. We have about 12 minutes left. So stick around. Again, if you want to go watch their live stream, on the link below, that is where I'm pulling this from, directly from SpaceX. And so if you want to go watch them directly, it's down below. But also, if you want to stay here and join me for this momentous occasion, there it is, occasion, feel free to stick around. I'm going to go find some more information, and I'll be right back. Okay, so I have found some interesting statistics, and I'm actually going to pull this up onto this tab right here if this works. That is for Falcon 9. I'm going to do a little bit of comparisons here for what we're going to be able to see today. So this is off of the SpaceX website. I'm going to, oh no, I moved. I moved everything. Let me go back to this and fix this the way it was supposed to be. And then Starship. I'm going to move my camera. We'll go off to the side. Nah, we'll go up here. We'll go up here. Okay, so this is off of SpaceX website. If you want to look it up, it is just spacex.com, vehicles/vehicles/Starship. And so this is what we're going to be seeing today. This is SpaceX's Starship spacecraft and Super Heavy rocket. This is all together. Collectively referred to as Starship, represents a fully reusable transportation system designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth, orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond. Starship will be the world's most powerful launch vehicle ever developed, capable of carrying up to 150 metric tons fully reusable and 250 metric tons expendable. So this is the tallest and largest, as they say, launch vehicle to date, with a height of 120 meters. Now, if we put that into perspective, that is about a 40-story building off of kind of the math that I was looking at. Sorry, 36-story building. If you know how big stories are or floors of a building, that is pretty big. And this is something that is going to be launched out today. It's about 9 meters in diameter, which I don't really have a size comparison for that, but that's pretty big. And payload capacity is 100 to 150 tons if it's fully reusable. Now, when they say 250 tons expendable, I think that means that they don't land the booster. I'm not totally sure what they mean by expendable, what part of the system they are expending and not using anymore if they want to get that 250 metric tons. But to put into perspective, 250 tons, let's put in perspective of the Falcon 9 real quick. So right now with the Falcon 9, we have, I'm not going to be able to show this very well. Let me just go straight down to here. Here we go, the fact sheet for the Falcon 9. So right now we're looking at the overview. We're about 70 meters tall, whereas Starship is 120 meters tall. So this is already almost double the size of a Falcon 9 just in height. Diameter is 3.7, and so it is double plus some in terms of its diameter. Mass, don't really care about how heavy it is, at least. So payload to LEO, which is low Earth orbit, and GTO, which is geostationary orbit, and then payload to Mars, which is interesting. I've never actually seen them put payload to Mars here. That's something new. 6,000 kilograms. And then how many kilograms is in a ton? How many? There's about 907 kilograms in a ton. So we're looking at about 4.5 tons of payload. Starship can carry 100 to 150 tons. That is something that is like astronomical, the difference between these two. And this is what we're currently using right now, which is the Falcon 9s. These are using the Merlin 1D engines. Let's see if they have anything else. Here's the first stage. And if you actually go to Cape Canaveral and you go to their space center, you can see one hanging up. And it's really cool. Seeing the Falcon 9 hanging out of in a building is probably one of the coolest views I've ever seen. But it also kind of puts into perspective that they can hang this thing inside of a building that they've built. And this is 70 meters shorter than the Starship. That just blows my mind about how big Starship actually is. This is the Falcon 9, and we'll take a look at engines. So here we're using 9 Merlin 1D engines, which is where the Falcon 9 comes from. And I actually did a presentation over these engines. Their thrust at sea level is 7,600 kilonewtons, and thrust in vacuum is 8,227 kilonewtons. These are what SpaceX has been using for their Falcon 9s. Now, when we go over to Starship, we are currently using the Raptor engines. It says it provides 230, I guess, is that ton force? What is TF? TF, going to say in engines. Um, Never mind. I'm not totally sure. I think it's tons of force because this is kilopounds of force, 507 kilopounds of force. But these are new. SpaceX's new engine that they have on both Starship as well as their booster that they'll be using today. And then we can take a look at the vehicles themselves separated. This is Super Heavy, or their booster number 7, which is what is on the bottom down here at the base of underneath Starship, and that's what's going to be putting Starship up, and it's going to be propelling it into its apogee today. And it is 69 meters tall, which is, if 150 was 36 stories, 69 would probably be about like 15, 20 stories tall. So 20-story building is just the booster on the bottom. Propellant capacity 3,400 tons, and then thrust is 7,590. I'm going to say tons of force again, but I'm not sure about that. That's Super Heavy. And here's the actual Starship vehicle itself. It's 50 meters tall with a diameter of 9 meters. Everything's got a diameter of 9 meters here. Propellant capacity is 1,200 tons, thrust is 1,500, and payload capacity is 100 to 150 tons. But what I was talking about earlier was whenever I was talking about how this thing is going to land, with the Falcon 9, we'll look at the landing legs. So it actually uses legs to land whenever it comes down, but what happens when it lands is it comes down vertical, pretty much in this orientation. This is off of a liftoff, obviously, but pretty much in this orientation, the Falcon 9 does come back down and land. And here's the Merlin 1D engine that we see. And then that's another liftoff picture, and they don't have a picture of it actually landing. But when it comes down, it's about in this vertical orientation. What Starship's going to do is Starship's actually is going to land horizontally. And so it's going to flip to the side. The nose cone will either go this way or the other direction, and it's going to fall horizontally. And instead of using grid fins, which is what let's see if I can see. I can't zoom in. But right there's 4 grid fins at the top of the booster. And what those grid fins do is they direct the airflow around the booster, and it helps it to land. And so these grid fins, there's 4 of them, and they all move. If you watch the videos of the flight, or if you go see one, or if you just watch their live streams, you'll see these grid fins moving. And so what that's doing is that's directing airflow. And so when this booster comes down, it's not wobbling everywhere. It's the same reason why a bow and arrow has fletching on it, or fins. This is like dynamic fletching, I guess you could say. Like if you're able to control your fletching, you'd be able to control where your arrow's going. But this is directing it as it comes back down so it can land vertically. And then they ignite, I'm pretty sure it's 6 of the 9 or it's 3 of the 9 engines for their landing berm. And then they'll either land on a drone ship or on land. But really the concept of the Falcon 9 is using these landing legs to land. But the problem with this is we'll compare the booster of the Falcon 9 and then the booster Super Heavy. Over here, the problem with this is refurbishment. And we know that SpaceX is really fast at doing the refurbishing. They're about launching once a week now, depending on if it's a Starlink or going through a bunch of other different companies. They're commercial, so they're launching a bunch of other satellites as well as missions to the ISS and crewed missions for NASA. However, what we see is that they have to have a lot of boosters. I think they have 8 boosters in production right now. I could be wrong in that. We'll see. We'll look this up. How many Falcon 9 boosters are there? There's 5 different block 1 to 4 are required. Block 4, how many Falcon 9 boosters did they lose? There are 13. There's 13 of them active right now, which is pretty crazy to have 13 boosters active. And their live stream is currently starting, so we're going to sit back and tune into this because this is going to be one of the most exciting. I'm going to try to keep the volume a little bit low because it's just music right now. And I'm excited to see where this is going to go today. So sit back, watch this if you would like to go watch their stream directly. As I've said, there's a link in this live stream description of theirs, if you want to go watch it, which is what we're watching right here. But if you want to stay around and hear me kind of fangirl over about some rocket stuff, completely feel free to do that because this is going to be one of the most exciting things that we have we're going to be watching. So let's take a look at this again while they're loading up. What the problem with this is, when you land, you have to refurbish these engines and the whole bottom of the rocket, and that takes time. And when this lands, it's like, I think it's like 5, 6, 7 feet off the ground, and with the power that these engines are putting out, you can damage the other side of your rocket pretty bad, and that takes time to refurbish. And so what they're going to do with Super Heavy here is they will have 4 grid fins again, but these grid fins are larger. And what they're going to do is, I don't have a picture of the booster and everything stacked up anymore here because they changed it on me. But however, they're going to come back down, and they're actually going to catch the booster, and they're going to land it basically inside of the Mechzilla, which is going to close around it, and it's going to be able to catch it directly. But we'll just sit back here now and wait for this to happen. Of course, really excited to see this go off today. Hopefully it goes off today. We all know that this is a test vehicle, and it completely could not go off. But if it does, it's going to be one of the most historic launches. We're at 8:37 a.m. Eastern Time. Launch window is looking good, and let's see if they posted anything else on their Twitter. There's just road. T-minus 1 hour, about 19 minutes ago, so we got about 40 minutes until launch if no holds happen and if nothing goes wrong. So we'll just sit back here and we'll wait for everything to get started.
Good morning. You're looking at a live view of Starship as it awaits its first ever integrated flight test from Starbase, Texas, in just a little over 40 minutes from now. Today, we're hoping to see our Super Heavy booster and Starship spacecraft, collectively referred to as Starship, lift off together for the first time. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Kate Tice, Quality Systems Engineering Manager here at SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne, California.
And I'm Shiva Bharadwaj, a space operations engineer here at SpaceX. Now, as many of you know, Starship is SpaceX's latest and largest vehicle developed to date. It represents a fully reusable transportation system designed to carry both crew and cargo to Earth orbit, the Moon, Mars, and beyond.
If you've been following the development of Starship over the last couple of years, you know we've been doing a lot of testing leading up to this big one. Once fully developed, it will be the world's most powerful launch vehicle.
Look at that. That is Starship completely going. You see the frost lines of the propellant loading, which is really cool to see. That like it's finally here. Propellant loading has happened, and they're loading the top side of the Starship now. They're going to have a lot more information off this live stream than I am going to, so I'm going to keep it on them. I'm going to probably key in here once in a while after I see things. Now, that is the top of Starship right there. That is the fins that I was talking to you about, and those are also all the panels that are going to keep it cool as when it re-enters ultimately one day. And so this is going to be one of the coolest launches. We got 38 minutes until launch, so sit back, be ready, and I'll probably key in a few times here and there, but let's listen to what they have to say.
To validate how the two vehicles operate together.
Any data that we get helps improve the future builds of Starship will be considered a success for the purposes of today's test. Every milestone beyond that is icing on the cake. The further we fly, the more data we can collect. If all goes well, today's flight test could last as long as 90 minutes from liftoff to an expected hard ocean landing for Starship. Whether we end the test with a hard landing or a rapid unscheduled disassembly, or some combination of both, excitement is pretty much guaranteed.
Now, if it does all go well, Super Heavy will fire up its 33 Raptor engines, and it'll lift off from the launch pad down in South Texas. About 3 minutes into the flight, we're going to hope to see the Super Heavy separate from the Starship spacecraft. It'll then perform a flip maneuver. So there's that. You can see that on your screen. And then it'll boost back in order to make a hard landing in the Gulf of Mexico.
And while that's happening, we hope to see Starship's 6 second stage engines ignite and watch as Starship coasts for about an hour at altitudes ranging between 150 and 250 kilometers before re entering Earth's atmosphere and make its own hard landing in the Pacific Ocean about 250 ish kilometers offshore.
Now, we are getting great camera views right now, but that's because we are on the launch pad. So we've got umbilicals and connections straight to the vehicle. But we aren't expecting to get very many good views once we get past booster separation.
Yeah, we do promise, though, for any views that we do get, we will share them in real time. We are watching live with you all, so we're excited to see those views ourselves as well.
Now, in a little bit, we are going to take a closer look at the vehicle and the launch pad. But first, today is a super exciting day. Everyone on the teams across Starship have been preparing, doing a number of tests and dress rehearsals for today's launch attempt.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, we saw a nice little recap of those tests in the intro video to today's webcast. For those of you that are following along, you know that many of those tests ended in those rapid unscheduled disassemblies, or RUDs as we like to call them. And it's been a long road to today. Just in 2022 alone, we had 9 static fires. We've had a couple of wet dress rehearsals. And of course, the launch control team has done numerous simulations as well.
So major shout out to the teams that have been preparing for today's full up integrated test. In fact, we've got a shot of Star Command at the South Texas launch control team. Look at all the people ready for today's launch attempt.
Yeah, that right there is our South Texas Launch Control Center. That is basically ground zero for everything that is happening today, in addition to a couple other control rooms that we have operating as well with operators on console, including the Mission Control Center here behind us here in Hawthorne, California. But with that being said, our very own Zachary Lupin is one of our SpaceX employees at our watch event in South Padre Island. Hey, Zach, how are things going on the ground?
It is a great day for a test launch today, Kate. Hello, everyone. My name is Zachary Lupin, and I'm an avionics reliability engineer here at SpaceX, and I'm at the Cameron County Amphitheater, where a growing number of SpaceX employees are gathering to watch what we hope is the first liftoff of a fully integrated Starship. Now, the Starship team has worked incredibly hard for today's launch test. Over the past weekend, teams held a launch readiness review, which included a comprehensive review of all of our vehicle systems, looking at avionics, GNC, communications, software, structures, as well as our Raptor engines and propulsion in general. Now, we are only about 5 miles away from the launch pad, so it's a pretty good view for today. And as we get into as we start to approach T-0, everyone here is clearly very excited for the events that are happening today. So as we get closer to T-0, I'm going to throw it back to Hawthorne to talk more about our rocket.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Zach. And we've actually got a little bit of a crowd forming behind us, too. Now, we've got a shot of Starship on the screen. The entire Starship structure you see is made of stainless steel. And when that's fully stacked, it stands about 120 meters tall and about 9 meters around. To help you give a sense of just how big that is, we've captured a video of some of our teams doing final integration prep work in advance of today's test flight.
Just like Falcon 9, Starship has 2 stages, which we will talk a little bit more about in a minute. But in addition to those 2 stages, Starship actually has a 3rd stage called Stage 0. It consists of all the launch pad infrastructure built around the rocket. You can see a great view of it there on your screen. It's truly an engineering feat in its own right.
And I feel like it's something we don't talk about very often. There's a lot of infrastructure that goes into fueling and preparing the launch vehicle before a large test like this, really any launch. Now, let's talk about Super Heavy. The name says it all. It's super, it's heavy, it's super heavy. It goes by some other names, the first stage or the booster, but whatever you call it, the Super Heavy will be the vehicle responsible for powering Starship against that mighty gravitational pull we've got here on Earth. And when it's fully operational, it's going to get Starship to orbit.
The booster alone stands about 70 meters tall and is about the same height as a fully integrated Falcon 9, but with a diameter roughly 2.5 times that of Falcon 9 and with 33 much larger engines.
Yeah, and having those engines, and oh my gosh, I love this shot. We can see looking up into the launch mount at the 33 engines on the booster. Those are each of the Raptor engines that's going to power today's launch attempt.
Yeah, this is an incredible view. One of my favorite views that we're going to get today. We don't have this kind of view on our Falcon 9 launches, so this is so exciting to see. You can even make out the paint markers indicating which engine is which. Like we said, there are 33 of them. So there's a lot of fire that's going to be coming out from those engines in just over 31 minutes from now. As we mentioned before, there are 33 of them on the Super Heavy, the booster, and we don't see it right now, but the cluster in the center are the ones that are actually going to gimbal and help steer the booster back down for its water landing in the Gulf.
Yeah, and they're a little bit different, Kate, than our Falcon engines. So on Falcon, we use a gas generator cycle. Here's a fantastic shot, actually, at the inner stage, so we can see the 6 engines that are on the ship side, 3 gimbaling in the middle, and then the vacuum engines, you can see 2 of them, and the other ones on the other side of the cluster in the middle here. So Raptor's a little bit different. It uses something called stage combustion, which means we basically pre-burn both the fuel side and the ox side, and then get those up to the right temperatures and pressures, and then mix them in the combustion chamber. It allows us to get higher thrust and higher efficiency on these engines than on Falcon 9. Now, Super Heavy also has 4 grid fins to assist with orienting itself during the return back to Earth, as today is the fully integrated flight test, and the first one, we're focusing on safely testing just the fundamental systems and operations on the vehicle. So what that means is we won't be attempting to land on land today. Instead, Super Heavy is going to be making that hard water landing in the Gulf.
Starship, or the spacecraft, is the second stage and makes up the top portion of the vehicle. It's designed for carrying passengers and cargo between destinations on Earth, Earth orbit, and planetary destinations. It stands 50 meters tall, a little taller than the Statue of Liberty. It's comprised of 6 Raptors. We saw those just moments ago. 3 of them are optimized for sea level, and the other 3 are vacuum engines, and they're optimized to operate in the vacuum of space. They provide a maximum of 258,000 tons of thrust in vacuum. The spacecraft is also outfitted with 4 flaps to help aerodynamically control the vehicle's attitude during atmospheric flight and enable precise landing at the intended location. You can see a view of those flaps there.
Now you can see the entire stack is vertical, and that's because Starship is designed for vertical takeoff and landing, as opposed to taking off and landing like an airplane. And that's really important because we don't have runways on the Moon and Mars. Fortunately, gravity at both of those destinations is not nearly as high as it is here on Earth. On Mars, it's about a third of what Earth's gravity is, and on the Moon, the gravity is just a sixth of what it is here. So Starship can take off in both of those cases without needing the Super Heavy booster like we need here on Earth. Now, for today's test, Starship does not have its landing legs attached, and that's because we aren't going to be attempting to return to the launch site or land on land. It's going to be doing another hard water landing at the end of today's test.
We can't wait. Starship is wrapped in a heat shield, which is composed of 18,000 hexagonal ceramic tiles designed to insulate the vehicle during atmospheric entry, where temperatures can be as high as 2,600 degrees Fahrenheit. The hex-shaped tiles, like these ones that we have here, roughly make up about 2/3 of the vehicle. There's a couple of different geometries. The one that I have is for the circular portions of the vehicle, so it has this curvature to it, and the one that Shiva has.
Yeah, this kind of is a hexagonal shape, and there's several thousand of these all across the body of the vehicle. And it's worth saying we need these because when a spacecraft re-enters from orbital velocity, it's going faster than the speed of sound and causes a lot of heat to build up that has to get dissipated by these heat shield tiles.
Yeah, one thing that's really cool about these is they're super lightweight. Even just holding them, we're able to even just like hear how hollow they are because of the construction. But they do a great job of dispersing that heat during that atmospheric reentry. We actually produce these in-house at what we like to call the SpaceX bakeries. They're located in Texas and Florida. So it's something that we designed and build in-house. And like we said, there's thousands of them. You can kind of see them on the exterior of the vehicle. So at this point in time, we are at T minus 27 minutes and 18 seconds. So let's head on over to John Innsbrucker for an update on the countdown. Hey, John.
Thanks, Kate, and good morning. I'm John Innsbrucker, Principal Integration Engineer here at SpaceX. We're currently loading propellant from the ground system into both the first and second stages. Now, both vehicles use the same two propellants. Our fuel is liquid methane at a temperature of just over 100 kelvins, or about minus 272 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, this is a different fuel from Falcon 9, where we use RP1 kerosene. And our oxidizer is liquid oxygen, the same as Falcon 9. But because there's no oxygen in space to support combustion, we have to bring our own. Now, a little bit of a recap. We did the go, no go poll at T minus 1 hour and 45 minutes. And once the team gave their goes, we polled about 20 folks. We started loading propellants onto the booster at T minus 1 hour and 39 minutes. And at T minus 1 hour and 22 minutes, we began propellant loading of the ship, the second stage on Starship. Now, LOX loading of the second stage main tank is almost complete right now, but we'll actually stretch it out and wrap it up and finish at T minus 5 minutes. And then at T minus 3 minutes, as the booster finishes loading, the vehicle will be fully loaded with just over 10 million pounds propellant. Now, currently in the countdown, we've just passed the T minus 26 minute mark. The good news is weather's looking good. You can see the blue skies there on the camera views from the drone. The only thing we're watching is winds. They are within limits at ground level. We expect they may pick up a little bit as we get farther into the window should we need to go that far. But the good news right now is that the weather is looking good. The range also is looking pretty good. We've moved almost all the boats out of the keep out zone overnight. We are working one, but we're still underway. And right now, as a reminder, if for any reason we do not make our test flight today, we have backup launch windows. This could be either 24 or 48 hours after today, and it'll depend on how far we get into the countdown. But coming up on 25 minutes to go, everything is looking good, Kate.
In order to make life multiplanetary, we need a fully reusable vehicle that's capable of carrying a huge amount of cargo and a lot of people to orbit and have a pretty quick turnaround. The idea is to effectively reuse launch vehicles just like airplanes. Crowd is getting excited here in Hawthorne behind Mission Control, as you can hear. Now, imagine if you had to wait for a new airplane to be constructed every time you wanted to fly. You'd rarely go anywhere, and it would probably be completely unaffordable for most of us.
So, if you just heard, everything's looking good right now. Everything's looking good for a flight, which is amazing to be 25 minutes, T minus 25 minutes from liftoff, and everything's functioning well. The booster is completely loaded, he just said, and then now they're loading Starship, and they're almost done, but he said that they're going to fully do Starship's propellant loading with about 5 minutes left. If you just heard all the cheering from Hawthorne, that's always a good thing. Hearing Hawthorne cheering is amazing because you know that something is about to happen. They just did a call out. I did not hear what the call out was because they were talking over it. However, but we are so close to this launch, and it's going to be amazing. And if you did hear, if they do not launch today, there's a 24 and 48 hour launch window within the next few days. And if it doesn't go off today, I will hopefully be able to cover those. However, if not, then we'll know if not. But the fact that we'll have potentially a day or 2 days if this doesn't go off today this close is super exciting. So let's go back. Let's listen to him. You got 23 minutes remaining. And then Starship's going to launch, baby. Keep our fingers crossed. It's a prototype. It could not go off, but we know that hopefully with all the testing SpaceX has done, that it's going to go off today. So let's get back to them.
purchasing, and he purchased all of the seats aboard Starship's first lunar mission in order to give artists and creators from all over the world the opportunity to go. And the hope is that what they will create in space will further inspire all of us here back on planet Earth. Now, over 1 million people applied for this mission, and earlier this year, they announced the final 8 crew members were selected, and you can learn more about them and MZ's mission at dearmoon.earth.
Dennis and Akiko Tito are the first 2 crew members announced to fly on Starship's second commercial spaceflight around the moon. This will be Dennis's second mission to space after becoming the first commercial astronaut to visit the International Space Station in 2001, and Akiko will be among the first women to fly around the moon on a Starship. The Titos joined the mission to contribute to SpaceX's long-term goal to advance human spaceflight and help make life multiplanetary.
SpaceX is also incredibly honored to be part of NASA's Artemis program to establish a sustainable presence on the moon to prepare for missions to Mars. Starship's early test launches, followed by those regular Starlink deployment missions and propellant transfer demonstrations, are directly advancing NASA's Artemis program, along with SpaceX's ongoing mission to make life multiplanetary.
SpaceX will conduct an uncrewed demonstration mission to the moon prior to the Artemis 3 mission, which will mark humanity's first return to the lunar surface in more than 50 years. It's an exciting future, but let's talk a little about how we got to today.
Now, Starship testing ramped up in July of 2019 with the Star Hopper prototype. It's sort of a short version of the Starship that we see today. There's a picture of it on your screen, the lovable water tower. Now, standing at just over 18 meters tall, the Star Hopper had a single engine and was test flown to perform landing and low-level altitude maneuvers. Starship's initial flight test was a hop that reached about 20 meters in altitude. This was followed by a second hop, the one that we've got on our screen, that rose to 150 meters in altitude. We took a little jaunt away from the launch pad and ended up landing about 100 meters or so further away from it, and you can see that on your screen. Now, notably, this was the first time that we had used a Raptor engine in flight and demonstrated control of this kind.
As a Star Wars fan, I can't not see a flying R2-D2 there. Now, after a series of 150-meter hop tests with earlier prototypes, the Starship program saw a huge breakthrough during a test flight of the vehicle known as serial number 8, or SN8. SN8 demonstrated a first-of-its-kind controlled aerodynamic descent and landing flip maneuver. Yes, I'm talking about the belly flop. This 12.5-kilometer hop test took place December 2020 and saw the SN8 prototype ascend to an altitude of 12.5 kilometers and conduct a belly flop maneuver. While it didn't stick the landing, the test was a major milestone in the development of Starship.
I love seeing the belly flop maneuver. Now, testing continued with the prototype on serial number 9. That was a 10-kilometer flight test in February of 2021. We had a nominal ascent, engine cutoff, reorientation, and controlled descent were stable. However, we unfortunately had a dramatic ending to the end of that flight when we had a failure on its engine to relight. That resulted in one of those rapid unscheduled disassemblies. But what was really exciting about both serial numbers 8 and 9 is how quickly we were able to achieve just our primary objectives in those 2 high-altitude test flights. In addition to getting lots of great data, Starship successfully demonstrated control of the vehicle and subsonic re-entry capability.
Ultimately, we performed 9 Starship high-altitude test flights in total, and in May of 2021, SN15 launched from Starbase, reached an altitude of about 10 kilometers, performed a number of maneuvers, and safely returned to the launch site. This was the first Starship prototype to fly, control its descent, safely land, and to be recovered in one piece.
Now, having achieved that success in our suborbital campaign, one of the next big challenges for upper stage reusability is to survive the high heating hypersonic phase of entry. Combined with the ability to refill our Starship's tank with fuel and oxygen while on orbit is what will enable a fully reusable transportation system that's designed to carry both crew and cargo on these long duration interplanetary flights. And that's ultimately what will help humanity return to the moon and travel to Mars and beyond in our solar system.
So as you can tell, it is nothing but an iterative process to get to the point that we are today and where we will go from here. That iteration is a core process of how we work here at SpaceX. We like to fly and we like to test early and often, both on the side of hardware and software.
Yeah, that's an awesome point, Kate. Now, we are continuing our countdown to Starship liftoff just over 17 minutes from now. So, of course, let's check in with John for another status update. John?
Thanks, Shiva. Clock is coming up on T-minus 17 minutes from liftoff. We're continuing to click towards zero. However, right now, we've just begun listening in. The first stage team is working a pressurization issue. They're troubleshooting that right now. Now, we do have the option, if need be, if we can't solve this, then we would hold the count and probably treat today as a wet dress and not be able to launch. However, we are continuing to do propellant loading on both the Super Heavy and the ship stages. Now, most recently, we began loading liquid oxygen and methane fuel into the header tanks on Starship. At the very top, just underneath the nose there are two small spherical tanks. That's where the fuel and liquid oxygen header tanks are. That started at T-minus 27 minutes, and that propellant loading will continue until T-minus 9 minutes. We'll also continue loading the main tanks of the Starship second stage, although they're pretty much full right now. Everything will drain back as we get ready for launch at T-minus 5 minutes. Now, on the first stage, we're continuing to load the massive amount of propellant onto the Super Heavy booster. That's going to continue until T-minus 3 minutes. You can see the frost line on some of the views as both liquid methane and liquid oxygen go into the tank. At 16 minutes and counting, we're also currently configuring the launch pad for liftoff. The booster hold downs are being prepared for the release at liftoff, and the second stage quick disconnect is beginning its configuration for release. The liquid oxygen and methane that are going into the second stage go through that quick disconnect. You can see it in some of the views, the arm that comes out just to the base of the second stage. That'll move out of the way as we lift off. At the same time, the SpaceX team continues to check in with the Coast Guard. We're working one boat that's in the safety perimeter. They are working to get that boat out of the way. We cleared several other boats out overnight. We're down to one, and we expect that'll be clear so that we can proceed with launch out over the Gulf of Mexico. But as a reminder, T-minus 15 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. We are working an issue on the first stage, and we'll bring an update as we get more insight into that issue.
So sorry, I have to turn my camera back on every time I switch away from it because it shuts off. So what he just said is there's about 15 minutes left until, well, now about T-minus 14 minutes until liftoff, but they are having a pressure issue. Pressure issues can be some sort of like leaky valve somewhere or not a seal not happening. So there's a very big potential here that could be something that stops Starship from launching today. However, they still are loading, so it's not a big enough issue as of right now that it's stopping loading and that they're going to have to do a hold. We do have a good while until the launch window closes, about an hour and a half here. But the countdown is still going. Like he said that there could be a potential wet rehearsal, which means they fuel everything and then they defuel it. They're also working on a boat. So a few different things are going on right now. Hopefully that things will get cleared up here and we'll get to see something going. But pressure things, most of the time aren't very good. So we'll keep in touch and we'll see if anything's happened. I'm gonna check their Twitter real quick to see if they've posted anything more about that other than this. But what you got to see under the side of the booster is the Raptor engines and just how many there are. There's 33 of them compared to the Falcon 9 where it only has 9 Merlin 1D engines. And we saw that the size of them is quite different comparatively. And so the amount of thrust that this is going to be able to produce and to get stuff off the launch pad is going to be absolutely amazing. But we are still fueling, we're still going, countdown is still going, there is no hold as of right now, and we'll stick around to see if everything works out and if they can get everything going for the launch.
Starbase directly employs more than 1,800 employees and is actually the largest employer in the area.
Yeah, and from that video, you can really tell, like, it's a beautiful location. It's close to the ocean. There's tons of wildlife. And that's because being close to the equator is actually a fantastic way to get to orbit.
Yeah, I love that we have so many employee events that allow us to participate with ocean cleanup and other environmental efforts there. We'd also like to thank Cameron County for being so supportive for all of our work in that area. Now, in addition to Starbase, we'll soon be adding another Texas location to the SpaceX family. We're opening a new facility in Bastrop, Texas, just outside of Austin, to support Starlink hardware production. The new facility will be over 500,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and the team has already started hiring.
Now, we have all kinds of openings in production and manufacturing for technicians and leadership and manufacturing engineers and all kinds of site support roles. Basically, if you can think of a role, we're probably hiring for it.
So if you're interested in helping expand human life to other planets or helping internet access here on Earth, consider becoming part of the SpaceX team at spacex.com/careers. Now, with that, let's check back in with Zach down at Starbase one last time before launch. Howdy, Zach.
Hello, Kate and Shiva again. You can really feel the energy here at South Padre Island as more of the SpaceX team have gathered. We're standing just over 5 miles away from the launch mount, and so from here we've got a very nice view. I would basically say these are some of the best front row seats you could get, and might I add, beachside as well. Now, the Starship team has worked incredibly hard to get ready for this test, and we're all clearly excited for T0. And as we get into the final moments, one issue that could hold the countdown or cancel the test altogether is if a boat enters the safety perimeter. Now, over my shoulder is the Gulf of Mexico, which is normally very open to all of the boaters and fishers. However, today, SpaceX is closely coordinating with the United States Coast Guard to establish a safe zone and ensure public safety. And up to T0, SpaceX is in regular communication with the Coast Guard to ensure there are no boats in the area leading up to the launch. Now, fingers crossed that does not happen. Now, I'll throw it back to the folks at Hawthorne as we get closer and closer to that T-0.
We're just inside T-minus 9 minutes and counting. We're listening on one of the background loops right now. Flight director is talking about the issue we've had on first stage, working the pressurization system. Decision right now is that we are going to stop the launch for today. We're going to transition the launch attempt to a wet dress rehearsal. So that means we're going to continue with the countdown sequence of events. We'll continue loading propellant, finishing up here shortly on the second stage. We'll also continue loading propellant onto the first stage, wrapping up at T-minus 3 minutes. We're also going to go through pressurization steps, other steps of the countdown. This will be a full validation for the team, but currently the plan right now is we're waiting for final word, is that I think at T-minus 10 seconds, we will finally stop the clock and then recycle the countdown for today. Now we're inside T-minus 8 minutes and counting. We're continuing to load propellant on both the first and second stage. You can see the Starship second stage with the heat shield tiles there. Carriage arms are open. You can see the condensation around the first stage tank as we load liquid methane, the liquid oxygen into the large super heavy first stage. Now that propellant loading is continuing until T-minus 3 minutes. As a reminder, and there's our great view looking up at the Raptor engines, the 33 engines. There's an outer ring of 20 engines, and then there's an inner set of 13. Those are the engines that can gimbal and adjust the course of the Starship vehicle on the way up. And of course, the first stage as it comes back down towards the water landing in the Gulf of Mexico. Now, when both stages are loaded, you can see the condensation frost on the side of the first stage. We'll have just over 10 million pounds of liquid propellant on board. Inside T-minus 7 minutes, we're continuing to count. Team is preparing for the hold and scrub at T-minus 10 seconds. Now, the good news is everything's been going good. We're just working that one issue. So we are continuing to count. Team will get this as an excellent opportunity to run the end-to-end of the system. Now, in a launch, in the next few minutes, the guidance system would be performing its final alignment. We will be doing that this morning. The automated flight termination system would be armed. We won't need to arm it today as we won't be flying. And we'll do final thrust vector control checkouts, what we call wiggles of the Raptor engines on the first and second stages. Now, normally in a countdown, if we needed to hold, there's a view of the second stage Raptor engines just above the first stage. Now, as I mentioned, in a regular countdown, if we needed to hold, that would come at T-minus 40 seconds. That's the point in the countdown where we can pause to wait for final checkouts or pressurization to complete. Now, earlier this morning, we thought we might have to hold at 40 seconds. Everything's looking good, except for the one pressurization issue that the team is going to have to troubleshoot after this morning. So we won't stop at 40 seconds right now. We'll continue all the way down to 10 seconds, and then we'll go into a recycle.
John, you mentioned that we're going to be jumping into a wet dress rehearsal here, and I actually
now
think
we're coming up T-minus 5 minutes. Overall, though, Kate Shiva, it's been a good day. It's a little sad listening to the flight director say that we're going to have to stop at 10 seconds. But I guess that's for everybody. It gives us a real run-through of the launch vehicle.
Yeah.
So that's a really unfortunate thing that they just said. Launch has been scrubbed today because of that pressurization issue. So they're going to continue refilling. It's going to be a wet dress rehearsal, which means they run through everything. They're going to continue fueling up until launch. And so they're going to stop at 10 seconds. We'll stick by it and watch it. But however, this is exactly what happens. This is obviously a test prototype, and so we know that whenever you get test prototypes, that things can happen. And unfortunately, something did happen today, and we'll get together and not we'll. I'm not part of the team, but I'll continue to cover it up until they end the stream here, and then we'll see what happens with the next launch window and whenever they're going to recycle and try again at some point. So it's been really fun, and thank you for being here. And of course, if you want to go directly to the SpaceX live stream, it's down in the description below. But unfortunately, we had to scrub today. But we'll stick around and we'll see the rest of the countdown and see what else they can learn and how quickly we'll be able to see if we have a launch window again.
So, and Kate, like it's also worth mentioning here, we're still going to take the count through to a pretty around the T-minus 10 second mark. So we're really going to exercise everything that we would up until that point in the vehicle states and ground procedures.
Yeah, it's like we said before, any data that we can collect today is super helpful. And that's exactly what we're doing. We are continuing to collect this data and allow the teams to have be better informed for the next attempt. Unfortunately, due to the needing to recycle the propellant, we are looking at a minimum of 48 hours until we are able to attempt this flight test again. So we're not quite sure what that timing will be at the moment, but we're looking at a minimum of 48 minutes or excuse me, of 48 hours at this point in time. But Shiva, exactly as you said, things look a little bit different on launch day, and we allowed the countdown to do its job, to basically get to this point, to allow the teams to work through the issues, and we're going to continue, like we said before, we're going to continue all of this down all the way to T minus 10 seconds, and that will really allow the teams to pretend like this is launch day and continue and gather that data.
Yeah, Kate, it's on the one hand, it's a little bittersweet. On the other hand, we watched them go all the way through. First stage propellant load, just now wrapping up. The second stage, even the header tanks up under the nose of the Starship that you can see on the monitors. Actually, that all went very well today. The weather was excellent. Everything was looking good. Sadly, we just have the one issue, but that is letting the team continue to count down. And we're going to continue with it here until we get the clock hold at T minus 10 seconds.
Yeah, so for those of you that have just joined us, we're now at T minus 1 minute and 30 seconds to what would have been the launch of our Starship flight test, but unfortunately due to a stage 1 issue, we are going to utilize today as a wet dress rehearsal. Instead, we are not going to attempt launch. The teams are basically saying that we're scrubbing our launch attempt for today, and we are expecting a minimum of 48 hours in order to recycle. So it's all good news, though. There's nothing really to be sad about other than we had hoped to be able to lift off today, but that's okay.
Now, one thing to point out for folks, when we do come back, when we clear this and we fly, one of the things you'll hear in the last minute, you won't be hearing us because we'll be listening to the countdown. But at T minus 30 seconds, that's when the flight director would give the final go for launch. Love to have heard that this morning, but something to look forward to.
Absolutely.
The other thing to look at is at T minus 6 seconds, we begin lighting the engines. Up on your monitor, you can see there, T minus 40 seconds. We did hit the 40-second hold point, and they are holding for a moment. In the end, they will release that hold. We'll go the last 30 seconds. But yes, when we do get to day of launch, the last thing to look at is in the last 6 seconds, light the Raptor engines in succession. So unlike Falcon 9, we're going to have to do that a little longer. We're hearing right now the clock is going to hold here at T minus 40 seconds. The Super Heavy and Starship are looking good. So with that, Kate, it's been a fast-paced morning. We got through it fairly quickly. But at this point, we're going to have to call it a morning.
Yeah, that's right. So for those of you that have recently just joined us, we unfortunately had a hold on the countdown today, and that is going to scrub our launch attempt. But we are expecting a minimum of 48 hours in order to recycle. So be sure to keep an eye on our social channels, and we'll share information as soon as it becomes available. Until then, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.
Sorry, trying to figure out a lot of different things here. So, unfortunately, scrubbed. And they kind of ended things a little bit faster than I thought they were going to. I thought they were going to talk a little bit more, but it did get scrubbed. As they said, we got about 48 hours, a minimum of 48 hours because they did fuel everything that they recycle. There was a tweet that sent out that one of the valves got frozen shut. That happens when you're working with cryogenics. Everything's so cold. So they're going to have to fix that. And then as soon as I know, when they know that they're going to launch, we'll be right back at it. So keep a lookout. I might try to start an Instagram here or a Twitter here soon to start posting updates, but I'm not totally sure. But keep a lookout. Thank you guys for tuning in. It was exciting. I'm excited to see this go off one day. And it'll probably be here in the next few days. So stay tuned and keep your eyes in space.